So within the United Methodist Church, one of the things that I've talked a whole lot about is disaffiliation. That's the context in which I started this whole effort. And so I've talked about lawsuits that are happening. I've talked about individual conferences and how they've handled it. Been all over the map with this stuff, and hopefully it's been helpful to you and a lot of others. The thing that is before the denomination now is paragraph 2553 was the measure created in 2019 to allow for churches to disaffiliate en masse. Now, they've always been able to disaffiliate quietly behind closed doors in negotiation with the annual conference. Thing is, some annual conferences are just not going to play ball. A lot of them just are not going to play ball. Or if they do, they're just going to just charge you so much money and make you do so much stuff. That's Baltimore, Washington. I just recently talked with a church that was able to do that. They had to just pay out the nose to get out and go through a prolonged process. There are a lot of churches that are just being told flat out, no, you can't get out. So is there any provision? There used to be 2548.2. That was a provision that allowed for a gracious exit. That got overruled and outlawed by the Judicial Council a couple of years ago because 2553 was in place. But once 2553 expired, 2548.2 did not come back into effect. So now in the Book of Discipline, there is nothing in writing that allows for a church to disaffiliate. And this is just kind of a hush-hush thing done behind closed doors. So there are some conferences that have wanted to be fair to local churches. In disaffiliation season, there were a lot of superintendents and bishops that spoke to local churches and said, look, don't disaffiliate yet. Let's just see what happens at the General Conference in 2024. And then based on what happens there, after that, if you don't want to be here, we'll let you go. So Bishop Graves in Alabama, West Florida made that promise and then broke it. There are other bishops and DSs that made such promises. Some of them have tried to maintain their word, but they haven't been able to use 2548.2 or 2553. But there is a paragraph, 2549. And this is the one that closes a church, whether it, the language is like it no longer fulfills the purpose it once did, or it can't be maintained or something. So some conferences and their board of trustees have made policies that you can have local churches go through this process and then close their churches to disaffiliate. And so you've had continued disaffiliations over time, but there have been a number of conferences that have said, well, we don't know if we can use paragraph 2549 this way. So Michael Grabowski wrote an article, UMC's highest court to determine how churches can leave the denomination, whether congregations can continue to leave the denomination in response to its progressive stance on LGBTQ issues. From 2019 to 2023, around 5,500 congregations have used a temporary provision in the UMC Book of Discipline to disaffiliate from the denomination. That was 2553. The Judicial Council, that's the Supreme Court of the UMC, has been asked by the Kentucky and Alabama West Florida conferences about whether another provision in the Book of Discipline can be used to exit the denomination. So the article about that, it's right here, Judicial Council ruling affecting church exits expected soon. So this is from the Kentucky conference, and this is just a briefing from them saying they're anticipating, they put forward this request, they're anticipating that Judicial Council will deal with it. According to the UMC Kentucky Conference, the Judicial Council will consider the matter at their meeting in Los Angeles from October 23rd to 26th. So they've already considered it. And have they put out a statement yet? I didn't realize how dated this report was. I'm going to go to... So we would be looking for a declaratory decision. Oh, okay, but the most recent date is May 3rd. Okay, so they haven't submitted anything yet. So we need to be looking for these things. Hopefully they'll publish it soon. I'm kind of surprised nothing has trickled out yet that I've heard. It's given some history here. According to paragraph 2549, a district superintendent can recommend that a local church be closed if it no longer serves the purpose for which it was organized or incorporated. From there, conference leadership can declare the property closed and then may remain, sell, lease, or otherwise dispose of the property for a closed local church in accordance with the direction of the annual conference, if any. So the UMC South Carolina Conference used paragraph 2549 to allow churches to leave during and after paragraph 2553 was in effect, having adopted a measure they called local church discernment process. So, yeah, that's something I forgot to say. A lot of annual conferences refused to even use 2553, and they used 2549 the whole time. I think that was partly just as a sign of disrespect. It was like not even acknowledging their authority to go forth and be their own people. It was just saying, we're going to close you down, and then that's the end of it. South Carolina Conference spokesperson Dan O'Mara explained to the Christian Post in an earlier interview that disaffiliating churches use the paragraph 2049 inspired process, quote, which is typically employed when a local church is closed because it no longer serves the purpose for which it was organized. On June 26, 2023, members of the 2023 South Carolina Annual Conference approved the closure of 113 local churches whose members had voted to separate. These churches completed... All right, that's boring. Michael Grabowski's been good at reporting on this stuff. So depending on what the Judicial Council decides, and it almost certainly already decided that 2549 can't be used for this purpose. So one of the questions I would have if I were still in the UMC is, okay, well, if these other churches were allowed to disaffiliate using paragraph 2549, does that undo their disaffiliation? And the answer is no. You can't get them back. Once the deed has been handed over, once you've gone through the process, there's no getting them back. But that would, at this point, serve to end any kind of official disaffiliation policy in any annual conference. They will now have no provision for having a general policy. Every local church that wants out will have to bargain and negotiate with their annual conference. And there are many annual conferences that will not do so now. They're done with disaffiliations. People at the top, I mean, Tom Bickerton, who had been the head of the Council of Bishops, said, we're done with this. We're not doing it anymore. The Council of Bishops largely stands together in how they deal with stuff like this. So there have been bishops like Bishop Bard who've been more amenable to the position of conservatives, but the bishops have been good at keeping each other in line and pressuring bishops to step out whenever they haven't been willing to. So that's what you're going to see is they've already been doing what they can to entrap churches, even having 2549 and 2548.2 and 2553 in place. They've stagnated things as much as possible to keep churches in, and now they're just closing the doors as much as possible to retain as many churches as possible. And if the people are going to go, then they can at least metabolize the church building and assets. So that's what's going to happen from here on out. It's a sad, sad picture. I did my best to warn everybody. So many churches just were not in a position to have the conversation and move in the direction that was needed. And I've got nothing but compassion for you guys. There are a lot of church communities that are leaving their buildings behind in order to faithfully serve Christ. If there are any pastors of those churches that would like to come talk with me about what that's been like and kind of paint a picture of that for people, please email me. I would love to bring you on to this show and interview you and learn about how you're doing ministry and pray with you. So consider reaching out.